Good morning, ASU. Parker Porrill here for Blaze A.M, Blaze Radio's newest and earliest talk show that talks everything between variety, entertainment, music, sports, breakfast foods, anything under the sun. I'm your host, Parker Porrill, and we're getting off to an early start today, and we will every single Thursday morning. This was a willing choice, by the way. I am not a morning person for those who are just tuning in. Normally, I like to get up when the sun's up, but I know that I have made a interesting choice when I get up and the sun's not up, when the birds aren't even chirping, when there aren't even cars on the road. So for those people that are getting up right now and are tuning in to Blaze Radio, Blaze AM specifically, I thank you for being one of this program's first listeners. And Blaze AM is in an interesting spot because even though this is our first show from the Bill Austin radio studio at the third floor of the Cronkite building, this is not our first show. Our first show was actually in San Francisco for the Super Bowl Radio Row. We had some great interviews, and for those just tuning in that did not see those interviews, was a great time at the Moscone Center. We're going to get some interviews right here at the Bill Austin Radio Studio later. This is kind of a late pilot, if you will. We already got greenlit, but they still want us to make a pilot, so this episode's kind of just to prove that we can do it. And so that's exactly what we're doing. We're going to talk sports to start off, going to talk life. Well, this is kind of us talking life right now. Early day, I woke up, and it's really funny because I pitched this show as like, grab your cup of joe with Parker Porrill. But for those that know Parker, I don't like coffee. And then I was like, well, you can grab your Monster, grab your energy drink. But then you realize I'm in a radio studio. I can't bring carbonated drinks in here. So it's kind of like we're pretending. We're pretending to have a cup of joe with me, and I know a majority of these listeners will not get up with me. So basically the pitch for this show is pretend to get up early and pretend to have a coffee and then pretend to have an energy drink with your host, Parker Porrill. So this show is pretending, but it's a lot of real content. So buckle up, strap in. We're going to have a fun time. And with that out of the way, first thing we're going to talk about is Sun Devil women's basketball. That's what we're going to kick it off with. Sun Devils with a 71-61 win over the Utah Utes. And this is the 20th win of the season for Molly Miller's squad. And an important win as well, because it's a season sweep of Utah, and this is something that Arizona State has struggled with, beating conference opponents, especially in the Natasha Adair era. Natasha Adair seriously struggled when it came to taking down conference opponents. Now, granted, I will say this. I'm not the most fervent defender of the Natasha Adair era, but her non-conference schedules were a lot tougher than the non-conference schedule that Molly Miller's squad had to deal with. You look at ASU's schedule this year: Coppin State, Eastern Washington, San Diego, which I actually called, Santa Clara, UNLV, Utah Tech, Little Rock, Southeastern Missouri, McNeese, San Francisco, Penn State, Oregon State, Gonzaga. Those are not the most eye-popping. Yeah, you get a Gonzaga and Oregon State and Penn State in there, but it's really lacking that substance to start off. I mean, remember Texas back in 2024, but I relent. Either way, Molly Miller has been off to an amazing start. 20-6 record. They head to Tucson this upcoming Saturday. Happy early Valentine's Day for everyone out there. And this should be a highly anticipated game. And if you would have told me at this point last year that the Saturday matchup of the second game of the season series against Arizona, that Arizona State would be favored almost 75% according to ESPN analytics, I would have thought you were crazy. But here we are. Arizona State 7-6 in the Big 12, taking on Arizona 2-11 in the Big 12. Should be an interesting game, especially with the way that it went down at Desert Financial Arena earlier this season against Arizona. A 7-point win for the Sun Devils, where they actually trailed at one point. This is a Arizona State team where nothing has come easy in the conference play. They learned that against Baylor. Baylor was a team, the Arizona State, that they thought that they had dead at one point. But all of a sudden, Baylor came storming back. Late game heroics were not in the books for Arizona State, even though they have been for a couple times this year. Were not in the books. So a tough loss on the road. And Arizona State rebounded against the Utah Utes at home. And these Utes, for those that are not in the loop, the Utah women's basketball has been on an interesting roller coaster. Last season, they lost their head coach going to the WNBA. And so last year was kind of sorts a rebuilding year, but I'm going to scratch that. We're going to get rid of rebuilding year because they did something. Their year was less of a rebuilding year and more of what I like to call a retooling year, because they have a great head coach. They have a great head coach, and they had so many pieces from the previous regime where they just had to retool everything. Gavin Peterson, the head coach of Utah women's basketball, took over for Lynn Roberts last season, and he's been doing a phenomenal job for a job that he just kind of got thrusted into with how the whole WNBA coaching search works. But either way, tough pair of losses for Utah back-to-back, falling to Iowa State and now Arizona State. But let's actually get into the game, because this was one where, once again, it felt like it was going back and forth, and we're going to have another interesting roller coaster, especially in that first half. A 4-point lead for Arizona State at the end of the first, getting a little more comfortable with themselves. But then the second quarter, I felt like Utah dominated it. I was shocked when I looked at the box score and it was only a 1-point advantage for Utah, outscoring Arizona State 19-18 in that second quarter. So obviously Arizona State only winning by 3 at the half. But either way, Arizona State, to their credit, even though I felt like Utah dominated this second quarter, they battled back. They battled all the way back to make it a one-possession lead at the end of the first half. So credit where credit is due. Arizona State continues to fight, and they continue to make it look not easy, but like they belong to be there, which is the most important part. Because when you have an easy non-conference schedule, and this is what I'm seeing from a lot of WBB followers, is that a lot of people believe that this Arizona State team lacks substance because of their non-conference schedule. And I'm here to tell you that this Arizona State women's basketball team is legit. Now, do they have faults? Yes. They are not a perfect team. They struggle at shooting the 3-ball, and they struggle with efficiency. But all of those worries, I feel a lot better with after this last performance. Look at Arizona State from the field yesterday, 45%, 25 for 55. And Arizona State, normally we see them get up in the 20s when it comes to the 3-ball. They were a lot more patient. 7 for 13, 54% from 3. This is what Arizona State needs to do, because they have some shooters, but it is really unreliable to get them going. It is really unreliable. So I like the hesitancy on the 3-ball in this game. Felt it worked in the Sun Devils' favor. But also, story of the game, the two most important factors in this game, free throws. Arizona State only missed 1. They were sent to the stripe 15 times. Yes, you heard that right. 14 for 15 from the charity stripe. That is an eye-popping statistic. Arizona State just continues to amaze when it comes to getting to the charity stripe. This is one of their best performances. For those who have watched Arizona State women's basketball going back to the Natasha Adair era, this is a breath of fresh air. That team struggled to make free throws, especially in clutch situations, but this Arizona State team is different. But the last statistic that is truly eye-popping is the turnovers. Utah committed 21. Arizona State committed 11. Yeah, a 21-11 difference in the turnover margin, because this Arizona State team, it's one thing if you can force turnovers, but it's another thing if you yourself do not commit turnovers. And that's exactly what Arizona State's philosophy is, and that's what they continue to do. Now, one thing I will say, Arizona State, they got out-rebounded, which is something they're going to continue to struggle with, especially when it comes to their size down low. They have it, but they struggle at certain points. So this is something that it's going to be really interesting to see, especially when they battle against higher quad 1 and quad 2 opponents. So we'll see how that fares, but this is a game that Arizona State led for 96% of the time. They had their largest lead at one point was by 11, and overall, not a huge sense of comfort for Arizona State fans at Desert Financial Arena throughout, but towards the end of the fourth quarter, you start to feel, all right, they're in control. As long as they don't botch this, they have the win, and that's exactly what Arizona State went through for a big, big win for Molly Miller's squad. And before we wrap up talking about Arizona State women's basketball, just have to notch that Molly Miller ties the most wins for a Arizona State women's basketball head coach in her first season since the early 2010s, where an interim head coach did it first. So for those that are just in layman's terms, Molly Miller is the first actually hired women's basketball head coach for Arizona State to win 20 games in her first season. A huge mark for Molly Miller. This is the first 20-win season for Arizona State since the 2019-2020 season, and the most home wins since the 2015-2016 season with 14. Arizona State has gotten close to the 18 mark before, but we'll see if Molly Miller can actually do it, because her team battles different at home. We'll see how it all fares, and we'll keep you in the loop on ASU women's basketball here at Blaze A.M. Don't go anywhere. When we return, we'll have more sports and variety with Parker Porrill early in the morning at Blaze A.M. And this is Blaze A.M. featuring your host, Parker Porrill, early in the morning, Blaze Radio's newest talk show and earliest talk show, where we get to talk sports, variety, music, anything under the sun, entertainment as well. We'll throw it in there. Why not? I'm somebody who I like to have a nice hearty breakfast, but not really of consistency. So I guess less hard and more just out there. So woke up, had an apple, had a rice cake, and out the day we start. And it's really nice to have a breakfast on the go, because I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit late to getting in here. But we're human. First day. So we're still getting going. Breakfast powering through the day. And as we power through the day, how about we talk some men's basketball? We talk some Arizona State women's basketball. I want to look at the men's basketball rankings, coaches poll, AP Top 25. I know there's still some stuff to change because Arizona, big difference there, especially on the broadcasting side, because Arizona and Arizona State, for some reason, I don't know, two rivals, especially state college rivals, they get confused for each other more than Arizona and Arizona State. And I'm somebody who I can let a lot of things slide. I'm somebody who's like, especially for broadcasters, because it's a hard job. It's a fun job. And so you don't want to give broadcasters too much slack just because you're like, all right, it's a fun job. Do it right. But at the same time, prep is so important. And so it's a little shocking when professional broadcasters continue to confuse Arizona and Arizona State with each other. And I felt that happened in the last broadcast more so than other broadcasts I've heard, but not to say it was a bad broadcast. It's just, why does this keep happening? Why does it keep going on? But either way, Arizona lost for the first time this season on the road to Kansas, and Kansas continues to shock me, because I thought this was a Kansas team, especially with the health problems that Bill Self has had, was going to take a downturn, but they continue just to fight and fight hard. And so that's going to make the AP Top 25 very interesting, because I'm somebody who I've been held in the belief that the top team in the country is Michigan. I've believed that from day one this season, especially with that dominant win against Gonzaga. I know Gonzaga is now at rank number 12, but and those 2 losses from Gonzaga are really holding them back. But as somebody who's, for lack of a better term, an Alabama basketball fan, I say lack of a better term because it is hard to watch them these days with a smile on your face and pretending everything's sunshine and rainbows with the Charles Bediako situation, especially here, particularly at this school where not too many people are willing to hear you out. If in Alabama, if I would be like, oh, I still support Nate Oates, they would be like, oh, okay, I get that. But out here, I actually have to be like, oh, I'm still a fan because of this, because people think that Nate Oates is committing a serious sin, which is a topic for maybe next week's show, because I do have a lot of thoughts on it, and I do think that there is a lot of misinterpreting of the situation. But anyways, Michigan is the best team in college basketball. Dusty May just continues to amaze. The one loss for this Michigan team was at home, actually, against the Wisconsin Badgers, and this is a very interesting Badgers team. This Wisconsin men's basketball team, along with the TCU Horned Frogs, for anybody that hasn't seen either of those teams' schedules, these two are the most interesting teams in college basketball. Because on one hand, this is a Wisconsin team that you're like, oh, they beat number 8 Illinois, and then they beat number 2 Michigan, and they continue to look competitive against high-quality teams. But then you think this is also a team that lost to Villanova at home. This is a team that lost to USC at home. And for TCU, just so we can get it out there really quickly, this is a team that lost to the University of New Orleans to start the season. Yeah, the University of New Orleans. But this is also a team that beat Florida at a neutral site. Although they did lose to Michigan, they were competitive with Michigan, only lost by 4, and that's hard to say. This also was a TCU team that went on a 4-game losing streak, but they beat Baylor. And now this past weekend, they beat Iowa State. They went on a 12-0 run to end the game, and they beat the Cyclones. This is a TCU team that if I'm in March, I do not want to play them. I do not want to play them. But now it's enough. I've got those dark horses out of the way. AP Top 25, or AP Top 4, in my opinion, should go Michigan, Arizona, Houston, and Duke. Yes, I know Duke lost to North Carolina, but North Carolina still has those 4 losses. I think UConn moves to 5. Iowa State slips down. Nebraska is going to slip down. Illinois is going to slip down. Kansas is going to jump up. Michigan State might jump a little bit more up, but I think North Carolina, Gonzaga might hurdle them. Virginia is in a very interesting spot because they're sneaky. Virginia is sneaky with their 20-3 record, but they're getting up there. They absolutely are. But either way, I think the rankings should go Michigan, Arizona, Houston, and Duke, with UConn at 5. But that said, I think the best teams in college basketball right now are Michigan and UConn. And now you might be saying, Parker, but you have UConn at 5. Relax. UConn's going to get there. These rankings don't mean anything at this point in the year. The only thing that matters is that you have one of those number 1 seeds heading into March Madness and in late March after conference tournaments. So relax. The season's going to get out there. The strength of schedule is going to show, especially in the Big East. So everything is going to work out. But that's where it's at this point of the year. All right, to wrap up this show, MLB spring training is about to get underway. And before we do, I want to talk about some of my projections for the MLB. Now, as we'll go on with the coming weeks in this show, I'll eventually get to who I think is going to win the World Series. I don't want to give that away just yet as I continue to gather my thoughts. However, I will give some interesting thoughts that I have on this season just because I have a lot of questions. Mainly the Caleb Durbin trade. Now, some MLB fans might be like, well, the Caleb Durbin trade, it seems just like an interesting, highly touted prospect from the Brewers going over to Boston, Boston needing an infielder with Devers going to the Giants and finally filling that hole. Yes, it seems like a good enough trade on both sides, but I am continually shocked by this Brewers team. Now, I'm not saying that the Milwaukee Brewers are going to be a bad team this year, and not by any small margin. I think this is going to be a very competitive Brewers team, but they lack firepower. They lack firepower without Caleb Durbin. Durbin just seemed to be such an emotional leader, just seemed like such a mature leader as well. And now the Brewers traded him away. And I'm not saying they didn't get anything of quality in return for Caleb Durbin. I think the Caleb Durbin trade was beneficial for both sides, but mainly I think that this is a trade that the Brewers will come to regret, especially when it comes late into the season. So 6 players being sent back and forth: Kyle Harrison, Shane Drohan, and David Hamilton going to Milwaukee, Caleb Durbin and a couple of prospects heading out for Boston. And Boston now, I think their offense is gonna start to have an uptick. Their defense is gonna get better. Caleb Durbin, I think the city of Boston is gonna love Caleb Durbin. I know the Milwaukee Brewers loved Caleb Durbin, so I think Boston had a slam dunk getting Caleb Durbin. Going to be very interesting to see how Durbin does for the Red Sox, how he matriculates in the lineup. But either way, this is going to be a very interesting MLB season. I think Boston is my American League East dark horse. Not saying they're going to win it outright, because Toronto and New York, they are two really, really good teams. And the American League East is going to be one of the best subdivisions in all of baseball. It really is, because all of the teams in it are of high quality, in my opinion. Baltimore is the only one where they're kind of straggling in no man's land, I feel. I feel like you could tell me they're going to have an amazing season next year. I could be like, oh, I believe that. Or they could be like, oh, they're going to have a downturn. And I could also believe that, just because of how unreliable and up and down they've been these past couple of seasons. And not only how up and down they've been overall, but throughout the seasons. It feels like, oh, they're on a great run. Oh, now they're not so good. And Tampa Bay, who knows what they're going to do. They're going to be back in Tropicana. So they're finally going to be back at home base. So who knows? Who knows how it's going to go? The American League East is going to be very, very interesting. Toronto, New York, and Boston are going to be in a tight race all season long. I think Boston's going to make it very interesting with the addition of Caleb Durbin. So that's kind of my American League East preview. I think Boston is going to shoot up a lot of people's expectations and really shock a lot of teams. But that's going to be about it for Blaze A.M. this early in the morning. I hope everybody had a wonderful morning listening to me talk sports, variety, music, and news, and listening to some great songs here at Blaze Radio. But for everyone out there, I hope you have a great morning. I hope everybody makes their classes. I hope everybody makes their treks to work. I hope everybody has a great breakfast that's tuning in right now. But for Blaze A.M., I'm your host, Park Porrill, wishing you all a great day, and have fun watching sports today.